Welcome to the 2021 Legislative Preview, which is being co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters, Los Alamos, and AAUW Los Alamos. I'm Judyth Prono, and I will be your moderator tonight. And we are pleased to have with us our three state legislators, Representative Christine Chandler, Senator Roberto Bobby J. Gonzales, and Senator Leo Jaramillo. We're going to follow the usual format for legislative previews. We will start with each legislator having 15 minutes to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on how things will run in the session this year, and also to discuss their top legislative priorities and some of their expectations for the session. After their presentations, we will open the meeting to questions from the audience. And these questions should be entered through your chat box. And the questions should be sent to Questions, Lynn Jones. Lynn will read them, and then the legislators will have 2.5 minutes to respond, and Lynn will serve as our timer as well. When you are drafting these questions, please indicate to whom you are addressing them or whether you would like all three legislators to respond. Keep your questions short so that Lynn can read it in a minute or less, and include only one question per chat entry. So if you have several questions, please put it into several entries. So with those logistics out of the way, let's begin our preview with Representative Chandler, who begins her second term in the House. And Representative Chandler, how will the upcoming session be a little different than before? And what are some of your priorities and expectations for this 60-day session?
Well, first, if I could thank the League and AAUW for organizing this event. It's a long-standing tradition in Los Alamos to have this legislative preview a week or two before the session, and it's always great to have good attendance, and I imagine there's very good attendance here today, and I'm pleased to be with the League and the AAUW members, and look forward to your questions. So how will the session be run? That's the $64,000 question, and there's been a lot of discussion about it. Yesterday, there was a legislative council meeting, and that's a group of legislators led by leaders in the House and the Senate and others and other members, where a lot of policy and logistical things are discussed. And of course, there's been a lot of discussion in the last 2 months or so, really, as to what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. So speaking only for the House, because I think the senators will have maybe some slightly different kinds of logistical details than we in the House will be having, is it's going to be virtually of all virtual session. The plan is for all committee hearings to be virtual. And we did that in the last 2 special sessions that we had in November, you'll remember, and also in June. And the June one was a little rocky, I think, and I think we're getting better at it. And the November one, I think, went better. And our hope and expectation is that we're getting better at it, and there will be more efficiencies as we improve our skills and we use our software improves and so on. So all committee hearings will be virtual. We will continue to invite public participation just as we do in live, when we have live committee hearings, and people will be able to speak to particular legislation as we're hearing those bills. It's very similar to what we do. And people who have internet can participate through Zoom, and for folks who don't have good access to internet, there will be arrangements for telephone, just calling in and offering your input. So that's committees. For floor sessions, again, It will be virtual. Now, that does not mean we will not have people on the floor. The speaker, I believe, is going to be on the floor. There will be some staff on the floor, and members will not be barred from participating from the floor, but all members will be expected and required to use a virtual medium to participate. So everyone will be on an even footing in terms of how they choose to participate. So that's sort of the logistics of it all. The Roundhouse, to my knowledge, will not be open to the public. I think that was discussed yesterday at the Legislative Council. There will be, I think, some access for the press to be in the building, and I don't know all the details on how that's going to be arranged, but I think that is going to be the case. And members will have access to their offices, and they are free to use their offices to participate by Zoom. We are free to perhaps stay at home if that works as well. The first day of the session, everyone is expected to be there because we'll need to enact some rule changes before we can move to this virtual process. So that's my understanding, and that's as of information that we've received from as of yesterday. It's going to be difficult. Everyone much prefers interacting with the public on a one-on-one interpersonal basis. And we also prefer interacting with one another one-on-one in a live interpersonal basis. And there is something that is lost in terms of the quality, I think, of communication and the benefits from personal interaction. So that will be greatly missed. In terms of my legislative priorities, and I know that's a topic you wanted us to touch on, I have to date filed 4 bills, pre-filed 4 bills. 2 of them are employment-related bills. One is an earned sick leave bill that would require employers to offer sick leave to their employees. And the other is a bill that I introduced in my first term, and I'm bringing it back. And it's a Paid Family and Medical Leave Act bill. They're related, but they're not identical benefit packages. So the sick leave bill would allow people up to 5 to, I think, 8 days, depending on the size of the employers of sick leave. And I think we all recognize the need for people to have that safety net when they're not well, and so they won't go to work and expose others. We know people who are at work who are sick are not as productive, and employers actually lose productivity when that happens. And certainly there's a public safety, health and safety issue associated with ensuring people don't come to work sick. Paid family and medical leave is a much more long-term kind of a leave program. And the way my bill sets it up is it's kind of an insurance program where the employers and the employees pay a very small amount of money into what will be a trust fund operated by or administered by the Workforce Solutions Department, and people who are eligible and need to take paid family or medical leave would apply to that program and have a portion of their salary covered up to a cap. So those are 2 significant bills that I'm handling. I'm also carrying a water leasing bill that's a priority for the New Mexico Osakie Association. And what that bill does, it reminds the Office of the State Engineer of his responsibility to honor due process in the context of water leases. And presently, the state engineer preliminarily has engaged in a process of preliminarily approving leases of water without addressing protests. So what happens is he frequently preliminarily approves a lease of water, and the protestants have to wait for a long period of time to have their protests heard, all the while the water is being diverted to the person who is leasing those water rights. It's an important bill, and it's a bill that recognizes an individual's property interest and their right to due process. I also filed an increase to the low income compensating tax rebate. That particular rebate was designed to address in part the lack of progressivity in our tax code. We rely heavily on GRT as a mechanism for raising revenues to support state operations. And I think all of us recognize in this group that that's a regressive system. So through the income tax avenue, we put in place something called a rebate system for lower income individuals who qualify based on their income and number of dependents. We have not adjusted that rebate system since 1998. So it's way out of date in terms of income levels and amount of rebate. So I'm adjusting it to the consumer price index from that lengthy period of time. And lastly, I'm likely to be filing a tobacco tax increase this session. That hasn't come to fruition yet, and that's a bill that I'm working on right now. In terms of other things of importance that the legislature will be looking at that I'll be asked to look at is certainly broadband is going to be on the forefront of, I think, all of our agenda. I spent the summer with a working group where we've been talking about issues that need to be addressed in terms of broadband. I understand Senator Padilla will be introducing legislation, or may have already introduced legislation that will attempt to provide mechanisms to foster the expansion of broadband and internet service. I think it's probably high-speed internet service is probably a better term to be using, because not all of it will be broadband based. The legislature will certainly be hearing about decriminalizing abortion again this year. No doubt that bill will be filed. In addition, cannabis, legalizing adult use cannabis is certainly most going to be filed again this year, along with a tax paradigm related to cannabis. And let's see, I've made a list here. Oh, early childhood and the permanent fund, adjusting our draw on the permanent fund to support early childhood. I believe that constitutional amendment or joint resolution has already been filed by Representatives Martinez and Maestas. And have I bumped into my 15 minutes yet? I thought that was a huge amount of time, but I realized I have lots more to say in terms of what's going on. I think I may have. I don't know. I don't see anyone waving their banner yet. So those are things that certainly it's going to be a very difficult session to address, just in terms of logistics. And we are definitely going to have a very full agenda. And I look forward to hearing the audience's questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Chandler. Okay, next we'll have Senator Gonzales, who is in his first elected term representing White Rock after being appointed to complete Senator Cisneros' term last year. Senator Gonzales, how will COVID be affecting the Senate in the way it operates? And then, of course, what are your priorities and expectations for the coming session?
Very well, and also, without trying to not be repetitious, but a lot of them are very similar. But also, I do want to thank the organizations, that are sponsoring this, and it's just again that open transparency of bringing information to as many individuals, to bring interest to what's happening with our government. But you mentioned something, and just out of curiosity, you said that this has been a long time for Los Alamos. So how many years have you been doing this?
Boy, I'm not sure how Lynn, do you know how many years back it goes?
No, but we might get Barbara to tell us.
Barbara?
Okay, well,
Had a partnership with AAUW over the last probably 6 to 8 years, and I don't know beyond that. Nina
Yeah.
Thayer has an answer.
It's over 50 years.
Mhm.
Wow, wow, that is very,
Okay.
I applaud you for that. That's very interesting. So, how will we be working in the Senate? The information that we have this far, and a lot of it is also based from the meeting from yesterday of the Legislative Council, which I am a non-voting member in that committee. And what we have so far, and I still see that we will probably be having some changes between now and to the January 19th. And we might get a more direction, or if there's anything that has not been quite clear to the members, we'll be having a caucus this Saturday. And, I'm sure that there's a lot of questions still from the members. And each party would have their own caucus. This is a Democratic caucus. But what we have is that we have been informed that we would do the business of hearing the bills and debating the bills and voting on the bills in person, and that would be in the chamber, in the Senate chamber. Then all committees meetings will be virtual, and my understanding to what I have is that the Capitol is close to the public, and they're looking at some arrangements, as it was mentioned by Representative Chandler, for the press, and for, I'm sure there'll have to be some other groups that, will have to be worked out. So, it's a little bit, right now, we don't really have quite a clear direction, and we have heard of that we would be meeting maybe 10 days and then handling everything virtually and then come back again. And, I'm sure that part probably will definitely be addressed on our Saturday's caucus. Now, going back to, it is a very different year. This is my 26th year that I'll be in the legislature, and probably one of the years that we have faced, the uniqueness and for constituency, for information, for everything, but we're making the best and, making it work. And I just want to mention also another part that I felt is very interesting is one of the big concern is, education. And by having students being virtual and some started with virtual and half virtual and not, but I'm going to say about 2 weeks ago, I was invited to participate with Los Alamos school board meeting. And it was very interesting because, we had a presentation from Chamizo Elementary School. And the staff there, I was really impressed because basically, if you want to put it this way, they have made a lemonade with lemons, and how excited and enthused they were by teaching virtually. And one of the things that really hit me was that before, you always look at, for a beginning teacher, and then someone that has 10 years experience, someone that has 20 years experience. And of course, the more experience, the more skilled. But by doing virtual, I see more of the younger group, they have more of the skill set, into the virtual part than versus some, of our veteran. But the other part is that this is probably the first time that within education, to teach education is an even level playing field, because they're all doing it, with virtual, which is new. And, so there has to be a lot of strategy, a lot of planning, and how do you work, the implementation to deliver the instruction. So I thought it was very fascinating, but, I was very impressed with Los Alamos schools, with teachers that were doing that presentation. Getting back in track with what you had mentioned about the legislation that we would be working with. So far, there's 5 bills that I have pre-filed, and I'm probably looking at, maybe another, I'll probably end up at least maybe with another 5 bills. And one of the things also that I have to be careful is when you sit on the House Appropriations or you sit on Senate Finance, those committees, time-wise, they're very consuming. So, you really have to monitor and how much legislation you want to carry, because you really need to be in the committee, and, it makes it hard when you start rolling into following your bills in the different committees. It takes you out of that part. So I'm trying to work with that very carefully, but giving you a few of the legislation that I would be carrying is there's 2 of them that are very the type of legislation that takes a lot of time, takes a lot of work into it. And one is the Health Security Act. And I have carried that before, and also with late Carlos Cisneros. We've done that bill probably like about 4 to 5 years. And every year we just get a little closer. Last year with the Health Security Act was the first time that we were able to put funding, and there were several legislators that put in funding for the study to be done, and that was directed to the Legislative Finance Committee, and then from there they contracted out a firm. So for the first time we have what everyone was always saying, well, what are the numbers, what is the cost, and how would we work? But at least we have the base now that we can work with that. That is a very if that happens to would be a very big plus to our state. If we could have health, the health coverage, and with the health security to, all the residents of the state of New Mexico. Now, another bill that has come up to me, and I have been the sponsor several years on this, and it hasn't been filed yet. And this is the trapping bill. And this brings in, a lot of supporters and a lot of opposition. But one of the things that I see with this is based on the outdoor economic development that the governor is promoting. And this is, again, promoting our state, promoting tourism, and, how can we use and just really benefit from our outdoor large areas that we have in our state. It is important that it's way overdue on the trapping bill. And we definitely don't want to see, in public lands, individuals that have been hurt by these traps, and also, with animals or pets that, happen to trip these traps. And it brings a lot, this is where you have, and I'm very sensitive to the opposition, but I also feel that it still leaves that opportunity for the private part of the private land. But, this would be for public lands. So we'll be seeing, where this definitely will take a lot of discussion, a lot of time. Another
I'm not sure I understand.
Another bill that is very important to me, and the reason is that for quite a few years as chairman of the Transportation Committee on the House side, is this department, the Department of Transportation, is one of the departments that until recently, doesn't receive any funding from the general fund. The funding comes, from the revenue that comes from the gas tax and special fuels. And now we have the motor vehicle excise tax also in place that went up from the 3% to the 4%. But I would like to see this, and if I would have done this a long time ago, we would already be there. In 1995, 6 cents was repealed. And the whole thing, that was a popular thing because the gas was too high and this was going to help everyone. And we really shot ourselves on the foot. That department has been very, very, very strapped for funding, since, when that happened. And we haven't been able to bring it back. So what I would like to do is to do a gas tax of a 1 cent for gas and 1 cent for special fuels for 10 years to have a sunset in 10 years. So at the end, we would have an additional 10 cents into the fund. And from our neighboring states, we're very low, compared to our neighboring states, on what they are recovering, from having a higher gas tax. Now, another legislation that I'll be carrying, and this is have been pre-filed, is making an appropriation to the Public Education Department for a college career readiness program known as AVIT. And at this point, we probably have like 20 districts that are already into the program. And this would be additional funding to eventually as many districts that we can get. This really helps, especially the rural areas and also, with minorities. And just to have another skill part, another, opportunity for students to have that preparation for making, the career readiness, as they exit post high school. So I will be working with that. There's a group of superintendents and quite a few educators that are very, very much involved. And presenting this last year, we were able to do it for the first time, and the appropriation was $100,000. But this year, into servicing more, we are probably looking at a much higher request in funding. I think I can stop with that. I do have other bills that have been pre-filed, but I'll go for that and to leave as much time as possible for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator Gonzales. So then we'll move on to Senator Jaramillo, who will start his first term representing Los Alamos this year. And Senator Jaramillo, what are you looking forward to and what are you expecting?
Hello, Judyth. Thank you so much for having me tonight. To the League of Women Voters and the AAUW, thank you so much for hosting this event. To my colleagues, Senator Gonzales and Representative Chandler, it's always an honor to be in your presence and to work alongside you for the betterment of our districts. And to those of you community members and community leaders, elected officials from Los Alamos joining us this evening, thank you for taking time out of your busy evening to spend some time with us this evening to learn about what we're going to be doing. So, the one thing that's exciting about this session is not just that it's my first session coming in as a senator, but the fact that I believe that more people can be involved in a virtual setting. And so both Senator Gonzales and Representative Chandler have talked about what we believe the logistics will be of joining this session and how we're going to run things virtually with some limited time on the floor. We're also going to be able to have office hours in virtual settings as well. And so I've heard from some people who are really excited about technology and who are really excited about the opportunity to join in the session this year, because before they wouldn't go because of either parking issues or not having childcare to get to the Roundhouse. This allows them to participate from the comfort of their home, and those without internet can still participate with a phone number that they can dial into. So a lot of people are excited that I've spoke to who will participate that wouldn't have been able to if we were in our traditional setting. And so some bills that I'll be working on and carrying with fellow representatives and senators include a housing omnibus bill, which is working on updating our housing code for equality and human rights, its landlord tenant protections, and increased pandemic protections, and modernizing our code in general. And so another bill that I'm going to be working on is, that I've been a commissioner and a chair in the Rio Arriba County Commission. We've heard from victims of sexual abuse or children who have witnessed violent crimes who get really scared to testify against the person who committed the crime and to stand as a witness in trial. This bill that I'll be carrying is protecting victims from harassment and post-crime trauma. And so the effects of trauma can continue to impact crime victims long after. So this would mean that the child could do one interview with a professional, and that interview would serve as their testimony in the court of law. I'm also going to be working on carrying a bill for the transportation department. So right now, there's some money that comes in from fees on carrier registration that moves to the PRC before it's then filtered to the highway department. This would eliminate the middleman of the PRC on holding back money and taking time to move that money over. This would mean that those fees immediately go to the highway department so that they could be used for projects that would benefit those of us throughout New Mexico. And so I'm also working on a bill that would protect people and their sexual orientation. So regarding the effect of that discovery of a person's sexual orientation or gender identity has no effect if somebody commits a crime against them. Let's say if they're murdered because it's a transgendered person who didn't identify they were transgendered, this would protect them. And then this would also be the effect that being romantically propositioned in a nonviolent or aggressive fashion by a member of the same gender or by a person that is transgender in any criminal case. So that would be protecting. And so, you know, one thing that I really ran on was ensuring that we tap into the permanent land grant fund to ensure that we foster education and ensure that we continue to develop our students K through 12. And so I'm excited to lead that and to also work on diversifying New Mexico's economy when we look at the legalization of cannabis. And so those are some major bills that I'll be working on, but I'm also interested in hearing from Representative Chandler more about her acequia bill. That's something that I believe I would love to read more on and possibly co-sponsor with you, because as we know, we say up north, water es vida. And so water is definitely part of our culture in northern New Mexico that needs to be protected. And so those are my priorities. I'm excited to work alongside again Representative Chandler and Senator Gonzales. And I look forward to your questions and hearing what your concerns are and what you would like to have me champion for Los Alamos this upcoming session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator Jaramillo. Well, we have almost an hour here for questions then. So please, if you have questions, put them in the chat box. Make sure you send your question to questions, Lynn Jones, and indicate which legislator you're asking you would like to direct your question to, or if you want, you can direct it to all three, and we'll have them all answer. Keep your questions short and make only one question per chat entry. So multiple questions require multiple chat entries. Lynn will read the questions, and then the responses, we're giving folks 2.5 minutes, and she will signal when time is up. So Lynn, are you ready to go with, I see there should be at least one question in the chat box.
I had a couple come in prior to the Zoom meeting. I will start with those.
Okay.
The first one is actually from the League. Following the census, New Mexico is required to redraw the districts for U.S. Congress, the New Mexico Public Education Commission, the New Mexico House, and New Mexico Senate. During the past few months, New Mexico First has convened a task force to draw up recommendations for a redistricting process that is more transparent and more democratic than the one employed in 2011. Those recommendations provide the basis for a bill creating a redistricting advisory commission. Will you support that bill?
Okay, and I think this is directed for all three.
That's correct.
Okay, so, Representative Chandler, can we put you on the spot and start with your response?
Sure. I support the concept, but frankly, I had hoped to see the bill before we had this meeting. I know that was the intent of the League and AAUW, but I have been briefed in general, and in general, I support the concept. But I learned in my first 2 years not to overpromise when people ask you what you're going to do, because often the devil is in the detail on all of these kinds of things. Election law changes, all of the, any number of issues. And so in concept, yes, but I look forward to seeing the bill so I have a better understanding of all kind of the intricacies of it all and so on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Gonzales?
Yes, thank you also for the question. And let me just relate to the experience. I have gone through 2 redistrictings process. And I also remember a cousin of mine that was in the legislature and telling me when, I first started as a freshman, redistricting is brutal. And, of course, I didn't know what he meant. And it is, it is. And because you're adjusting the boundaries and you're adjusting based on the census and based on population and, the expansion and growth. And so, what I have seen, and on both cycles is I really don't know what else you could do. The maps are there, everything is studied, everything is proportioned. And of course, there's always, different opinions, of what can be or how it could work or how it could affect. But eventually, being with 42 senators and with 70 House members, it affects, it has to affect members, no matter how you work at it. And one of the things that I thought was there's a lot of hours and a lot of hard work that goes into this, because you have groups and you have committees and you have groups as the process is developing and meeting. And what really was, to my part, hard to understand, that both cycles have ended up in court, and the courts have made the decision. And when it comes out of the courts, it's basically, I'm going to say maybe like 80% of what went into, but they are made some adjustments. And I have also found, the courts to be very fair, once it comes out, and that's what it is. So the more you can have involved, and, maybe in my part, by having this legislation and by having more transparency, maybe that might put another picture, to the courts if it ends up in the courts, which more than likely it will.
Okay, I think time is running out here.
Okay, very well. But yes, I do support it.
Okay, thank you. Senator Jaramillo?
When campaigning in Los Alamos County, one of the major issues that came up was redistricting. And I remember early talks with Representative Chandler, who explained to me that at one point in time, Los Alamos County, even as small as it was, had 3 different senators representing different pieces of Los Alamos. So if you look at that, that really divides the voice of Los Alamos County and doesn't give Los Alamos a solid voice that it needs. Now, looking at other communities of color, if you look at, let's say, for example, Pueblos on the western side of the state and the Navajo Nation have also talked about lines breaking up their voice when it comes to having representation in the New Mexico Senate and the House. And so because of that, I do want to read the bill and definitely find out what those details are. But the concept I also agree with. And because if you even look at District 5, Senate District 5 has a sliver of Sandoval County where there's not even one person who lives within that boundary of District 5. So in redistricting, we need to make sure that it keeps voices strong in communities and ensures that it empowers voters in areas where we've broken up pieces of their voice to ensure that it's one solid voice. But like Representative Chandler, I'd also like to read the bill and see what's written in there, but the concept as well, I agree with.
Okay, thank you, Senator Jaramillo. Okay, Lynn, you want to read the next question?
Yes. The next question is, Will the legislature try again to decriminalize abortions and doctors who provide them? Does this take an amendment of New Mexico Constitution?
And it's not directed to anyone?
All three.
All three. Okay. Well, Senator Gonzales, you want to start on this one?
Yes. You know, this is the one of it's 1969. That was when it was in place. You know, I do support the legislation.
Okay. Senator Jaramillo?
You know, I read an interesting fact that in 1969, women weren't even allowed to have a credit card. And so that's when this bill was introduced, right? At a time when we thought about June Cleaver as being the American and those rights taken away from women. And so I strongly support women's decisions and decisions that are for their own healthcare needs. And so one quick story I want to tell you, and I think I've told some of you this before, in the Jaramillo household, my brother and I were raised to respect the decision of women, whether it was our grandmothers, my mother, our aunts, or our cousins. Women's decisions were important and should be validated. And because of that, I'm going to take that value I was raised with to the Roundhouse to ensure that women's decisions are respected and that they have their own decisions when it comes to their healthcare and that it's respected.
Thank you, Senator Jaramillo. Okay, Representative Chandler?
Thank you for the question. And as I mentioned in my earlier presentation, I'm 100% certain that a bill will be introduced decriminalizing and repealing the old abortion law that's been in place. My colleague says since 1969. I think Roe versus Wade came in around 1974 or so. The concern is, of course, with a stacked Supreme Court, there's a very serious concern about infringing on an individual's right to make her own medical decisions. And I think there'll be a very strong push this year to repeal that antiquated law. And to the question about, is a constitutional amendment needed? No, a constitutional amendment is not needed to address this very important issue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lynn, next question.
Yes. Evidence suggests that ranked choice voting can reduce partisan divisiveness in elections. Would you consider pushing the ranked choice voting in state elections? And then a comment where it says, not that I could ever imagine US politics getting divisive, but one never knows. This is to all of
I'll
our.
call to all. Okay, Senator Jaramillo, would you like to start with this one?
So Senator Gonzales can echo this. Voting on leadership in the Senate, we had toyed with the thought of ranked choice voting. But in looking at the number of issues that can come up with ranked choice voting, we decided against that. And so I don't think that that would be a way for us to go when it comes to elections in the state of New Mexico. I think that there could be ways to improve maybe the electoral process, maybe including independents to be part of the primary, but ranked choice voting right now I don't see as something I would support when it comes to elections in New Mexico.
Okay, Representative Chandler?
I'm with my colleague, Senator Jaramillo. I recognize that many people feel that it might improve participation, but I'm frankly pretty skeptical about that. And I would prefer a system that is more transparent. I'm concerned that it's a process that confuses people. It's not something I think it would work very well in New Mexico. I am interested in looking at runoff elections so that individuals who would be required to have more than 50% of the vote to be able to prevail in an election, those kind of measures, because I think that's a very appropriate thing for people to expect, that you have at least a relatively significant amount of voters supporting you in a race. So that's something I'm interested in. And I agree with Senator Jaramillo, there are ways to open up our primaries to enhance participation as well. So I don't think it's a mechanism that would garner large support of the population in New Mexico.
Okay, thank you. And Senator Gonzales?
Yes, you know, I am in the same position as my colleagues, you know, for what's being stated. And, you know, there are ways to improve, but, you know, I don't think that this would be good for our state at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, Lynn, next question. Lynn, you're muted.
Will the cannabis legislation include automatically purging past convictions? To all.
To all? Okay, Christine?
Thanks for that question. By past convictions, I'm assuming convictions for possession of cannabis, you know. So if my memory serves me correctly, and perhaps Senator Gonzales can remind me, I believe the last bill that was filed did have such a provision. And I can imagine that the bill that is filed this year will have something to along those lines. So yes, I think it's likely. I can't say definitively. I haven't seen the bill yet.
Thank you. Senator Gonzales?
The same, you know, and as I recall, it did have that provision. And, you know, something of this magnitude, you also have to remember that from the initial part of the legislation, as it's the process that's going, you know, you might see a lot of amendments.
Mm-hmm.
So the discussion that we're having, you know, might be very different, you know, by the time it's at midway in committees. But, you know, again, you know, as it was mentioned by Representative Chandler, you know, I'm in agreement with, you know, her statement.
Okay, and Senator Jaramillo?
So myself, Senator Candelaria, and Representative Martinez want to definitely ensure that we see that in there, because that affects communities of color. And so this then would help out in ensuring that we work on anybody who had a small percentage of, let's just say, something they were carrying with them would then be taken away, and that would be dealt with. And so that's one thing that we're definitely looking at, and hopeful that that will make its way into the bill.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lynn, next.
Okay. This is directed at Senator Gonzales, but if the others would like to say something, they're welcome to. Do you have any plan to deal with, regarding the gas tax, do you have any plan to deal with the increase in electric vehicles and consequent reduction in the funds brought in by gas tax for DOT?
There is going to be legislation to address the electric vehicles. And again, it's fairness, you know, that, you know, everyone else is paying, you know, the portion that is on the taxed on per gallon. And yet the mechanism has gone in front of us, and we should have dealt with this probably 5 years ago. And it wasn't for a lack of effort, you know, it was there. But bringing fairness to the use of our highways and our infrastructure, and also which is very much needed. Now from industry, we see that, you know, there's been announcements such as Volvo, that by 2024, you know, 90% of their vehicles will be electric. So it's coming, you know, and we really need to act on it, and we really need to see it to where the most fair way, you know, of having a tax system for electric vehicles.
Okay, and either the other of you would want to speak to that? Representative
I believe
Chandler?
that last year there was a bill that went in that would ask that owners of an electric vehicle pay an additional fee when it came to their registration of their vehicle and then the yearly updated registration. And I can't remember if that bill passed, but I remember that the discussion when that was happening was people who opposed it were saying those of us who own electric vehicles don't have places to charge our vehicles. So we really can't drive from one part of the state to the other part of the state. And so I do know that was one argument that they had, but I do agree that anybody who uses New Mexico roads should have to pay in some way to ensure that we can keep with the uptake of our highways, which is why with that bill that I'm going to be working with the Department of Transportation to ensure that money goes in so projects are followed through. And so I do believe that anybody using roadways should pitch in some way.
Okay, thank you. Representative Chandler?
I agree with my two colleagues. I think it's inevitable that there is going to be some mechanism in place that will tax, in a similar way that the gas tax is imposed to try to, what some people view as level the playing field between the various choices. So, and to ensure that those using the roads are all paying for the use of the road. So I anticipate that. I don't believe, Senator Jaramillo, that bill that you referred made its way all the way through, but I could be wrong about that. But definitely, it will be coming.
Thank you. Okay, Lynn, next question.
What is the best way to build cooperation between Democrats and Republicans during this session?
Okay, Senator Gonzales, you want to start with that one?
I'm going to say that, in my 26 years, I won't say, that it's perfect, but I have always, done a very strong effort, to get along with all members, all 70 members. And I also feel that, on something like this, a lot of it comes from the leadership too. If you have that support and if you see that happening and, it just trickles down to the members. But by far, you can accomplish more and do more for the best, for our state, when you have cooperation. And within that comes trust, and it comes honesty, that if it's there, well, you're going to have it. And I know that when we worked for doing, with a college in Española to a 4-year term, to have that, and then also with Los Alamos UNM and with Taos UNM, it would have never happened if we wouldn't have had that bipartisan support. It was very strong, it was supported, and that's just one example, but by far, I always make an effort to do that. And again, just that trust, working and having respect. And I guess with just what we've been seeing with our national event of what's happened to our country, boy, do we need a really, really good, strong recipe to get back on track. And it has to start somewhere, and you can definitely support, that part of working together.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Gonzales. Representative Chandler?
Well, I frankly think it derives from personal interactions and personal contact. And in my first 2 years, I have not, on a personal level, on the ground, seen a lot of animosity between members. And I think members do look for opportunities to work together on bills and support each other on bills. And that does happen. Unfortunately, the rhetoric comes from the leaders of the party, and that occasionally drives some division. But on the ground, people talk to each other. And truthfully, I think one of the drawbacks of the virtual session this year, although it certainly has some upsides, is the fact that we will not be on the floor to the degree that we normally are, and we will not be sitting next to each other in committee hearings and having the opportunity to have personal contact. Because For example, I'm on House Judiciary Committee, and I have a Republican who sits right next to me. Representative and Minority Leader sits very close to me, and we have an opportunity to kibitz, and kibitzing builds relationships. And as a consequence, you are less likely to vilify one another when you're talking about a disagreement over a bill or an issue or so on. And you are less likely to try to vilify each other when you're debating a bill on the floor. And we are going to miss that this year. And I hope that we don't see that the personal relationships fray as a result. But really, it's just personal contact. And in general, people really like each other in the Senate, in the houses, and generally they get along and have. I love to kid some of my colleagues on the tax side because we are almost always against each other, always. And we tease each other. And I remember the day I said to one of my colleagues, well, you're not going to be accepting Medicare benefits, right? Because he was bragging about turning 65. And he's like, oh, well, that's different, because, it's a social program, right? So, we kid around, and they kid around with me about my views. And it's actually fairly congenial in terms of the environment. The press likes to, I think, overblow some of the stuff that's going on in Santa Fe. So
Okay.
I'm done.
Thank you. And Senator Jaramillo?
I think it's all about respect and understanding that having a difference of opinion is perfectly fine. And just because you don't fit in the box of what you think you believe in, everybody else should, you'll be able to work with everyone. So, early on in Senate orientation meetings, it was really nice to have freshman senators from the other side of the aisle send messages saying they were looking forward to working with me, or they couldn't wait to meet me in person. And that's because I think everybody understands that as legislators, we've all come to an understanding that it's for the greater good of New Mexicans that we're in office. And so I think when you put political parties aside and understand that your main goal is to ensure that you're representing New Mexico and doing what's best for the state, is when you can definitely get work done and not let parties get in the way of how you do business in the state. Now, if we could all be like Hal Marshall and have that tropical background and get us in our house, I think everybody for sure would definitely work even better together.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lynn, next question.
Okay. Do you support the Health Security Act? Senator Gonzales already mentioned that. Do Representatives Chandler and Senator Jaramillo concur?
Okay, Representative Chandler?
Yes, but I want to make a point, and it will be a point of contention for me if it's not addressed, and that is how Medicare is treated. And this is one of the bills that is a very complicated bill. And when I first read it, I had no idea that it provides for the opportunity for the health system that is ultimately adopted by the state to include Medicare as part of the program. And some of my constituents have raised concerns about that. And I really would like that particular issue addressed. And it may be one that becomes significant enough for me to question whether or not I will be able to support the bill.
Okay, thank you. Senator Jaramillo?
So I think the same constituents that maybe reached out to Representative Chandler in the same area also reached out to me with that as a concern. Now, early on in running, I was given a briefing on HSA and really liked the concept on low admin fees, the fact that physicians and other medical providers are part of the board, and the fact that it would be working on getting most New Mexicans covered with healthcare, especially when you look at District 5. If you look at rural New Mexico and New Mexicans who don't have healthcare coverage, the presentation I was given makes this sound as if that would be a big win for those in rural New Mexico without healthcare. Now, I'd like to read the bill closer and also follow up on the concern that Representative Chandler had, because that issue has also been brought to my attention.
Thank you. Okay, Lynn, next.
Okay. This is to Representative Bobby Gonzales, or Senator Bobby Gonzales. Will you please explain the 1 cent tax you described? Will you further explain how the 1 cent is collected? Is the tax 1 cent per gallon?
Very well. The structure and what we have in place right now, and for gas, right now the tax is 17 cents. And then there's a lot of little increments, that where the 17 cents go to. So eventually the Department of Transportation ends up with like 13 cents. Nothing of that would change. All this would do is add 1 more cent. So in a sense, the Department of Transportation with that portion of the 13, would just be getting a little bit more. The municipalities would be getting a little bit more. And this would be an increase at the pump of 1 more cent, which make it 18. And it would be for 10 years. So yes, at the end of 10 years, you do have a 10 cent gas increase. And what I would want to do is, and that it would have a sunset, is that this one would be categorical. It doesn't change the formula, but it's just categorical, that it will go strictly to the Department of Transportation for their portion, strictly for equipment. And the reason that I bring this up is I'm very familiar with the department. There's 6 districts trickling down to, probably would give each district maybe an additional $2 to $3 million for the purchase of equipment, which is very, very much in need. Our equipment is old, and I don't have the numbers with me, but I think we only have probably like about 67% of the equipment that is in functional, safe condition.
Okay, thank you. All right, Lynn, next question.
The school student populations may currently be down significantly because of COVID. How will the SEG, I will leave that to you, funds be distributed to schools who may have several hundred additional students arrive in August? How will those schools be able to hire teachers over the summer, assuming there are any teachers to hire, of course? Generally, this money is based on prior year attendance.
Do you want me to go first?
Go ahead.
You're the subject matter expert. Go
All
for
right.
it.
Okay. What we are working with right now, and I think probably most of you know Stan Rounds has been in education for many, many years. And he's the one that represents the Association for Administrators and Superintendents. We had a very long discussion on this, and then also with looking at some numbers and looking at some facts, is that we would go into a whole harmless because of this year not being a normal year, but it would start the average, it would be an average of a 3-year, but it would be for 19, 18, and 17. So it wouldn't be covering for 2020 or 2021. And use this, and right now we probably might be looking at it maybe for a year, maybe 2 years, until we stabilize and we come out of the pandemic 19 virus situation where we're back in school. Now, one of the questions that has come up and we don't have good answers for is most districts are showing a reduction in enrollment. And just to give you an example, like say there's a such and such district, they have 50 students that they can't find. They don't know if they left state, if they're somewhere else, if they're in another district. And that part needs to be worked on, to find the students that, that were in that district, at the time. But we are looking at it, and it would be a whole harmless situation.
Okay, thank you. Representative Chandler?
I think obviously Senator Gonzales has a very good handle on what's going on in terms of the formula proposal. I know there have been discussions in LFC and in other venues on this issue, and I know the school systems are very concerned about the fact that enrollment has obviously been lower in this year and how that will impact the SEG, and I fully support a hold harmless approach to ensure that, you know, school districts are not devastated by a formula that's based on, you know, really pandemic out of whack numbers. And what Senator Gonzales sounded very rational, and if something along those lines will be something that I'm very willing to support and will support for sure. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Jaramillo? You
Now, the average to calculate what schools would be getting definitely does make sense. So there's one school district in District 5 that has lost 200 students during this school year. And we're not too sure if it's because of the pandemic or, as Senator Gonzales said, some moving out of district, some moving out of state. So taking that 3-year average makes sense to ensure that schools get adequate funding for those students we believe will be coming in, and in case additional students in the districts.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lynn, next question.
Do you support legislation that would establish a state bank?
Okay, Senator Jaramillo, you want to start with that one?
You know, it sounds like a win, a big win when you read it, but I need to read the bill. And because I've also heard from small banks throughout New Mexico that say they can also offer the same thing as a state bank could offer. And that by bringing in a state bank, we then eliminate those smaller banks who are supporting communities currently. And so I definitely want to read the bill and hear from both sides before I make my opinion as to whether to support or oppose a state bank.
Okay, Senator Gonzales?
Okay, very well. We had a very long discussion on this last week, the week before, and one of the parts that is very positive about this is that this really gets, you know, this payday groups that, you know, charge those enormous rates of higher interest rate. And one of the things that it would be is that it wouldn't be an actual physical bank. It would be providing funding to our current banking, and which would allow our current banking to make loans to these individuals that have to go to these other places that are get charged a very high rate. So it'd be like a through funding, you know, to the banks. So it is positive for the state. And North Dakota has done this for many years, and it has been very successful. The other part is that, you know, this is just what I was told, and we were in committees and working. But my understanding is that the governor does not support, you know, this legislation because she feels that we already have the New Mexico Finance Authority that is providing this, but that's really not true, because New Mexico Finance Authority is more into like projects, you know, and here you would be talking about the individual that needs $5,000, $10,000, you know, that would have access, you know, to being able to acquire a loan. So I do support it. I feel that it's a very, it would be a very positive thing for our state. Not also that, but it would keep the money in the state, not out of state, you know, and so money in the state definitely will have a flow of the first time, the second, the third time turnaround, you know, in the community. And anytime you have that, well, you know, that's great. That's good for us. So I see it positive, but and I would really like to find out more about the governor's position on this.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Representative Chandler?
Yes, I also feel positive towards the bill. I've been briefed on it, and I have to confess I had not heard the connection between the ability to provide lower interest loans to people who seek it for commercial purposes. The way I understood it was again, not a physical bank, but a kind of a virtual bank that would allow state monies to be more readily invested in state state businesses within the state and so on, thereby promoting economic development. So I need to get a better handle on that, but I was very impressed with the information that I received in the various briefings. And again, everything is contingent on what's in the bill. So, but generally, yes. Yeah, it always, and what could be more detail oriented than a bank, right? You know, financial information is very important that all be very well done. So I look forward to it. I don't know who's sponsoring the bill. I can't remember, I've been told, I think, but it was very interesting. I'm very intrigued by the idea.
Thank you. Okay, Lynn, another question?
Is there any regulation or plan to regulate the size of electric generating windmills? The new GE windmill is huge.
And this is for all three?
Yes.
Okay, well, Representative Chandler, do you have anything to comment?
I have
on
not
that?
heard, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Judy, so sorry. I have
No,
not
go ahead.
heard of any such legislation. Occasionally there's legislation on dealing with how does one dispose of the various, equipment related to wind generation, because once they, outlive their usefulness, we have this gigantic stuff hanging around in the landscape. I mean, really, you take it down. So there are issues associated with wind generation, just as there is with all those kinds of activities, but I have not heard anything on that particular topic.
Senator Gonzalez?
I'm on the same, I have not heard, of, but it is a concern. And the other part that I always look at is, and I'm just seeing the vision is, say that you have 50 of these turbines, in such and such area. And it does become to a point where it's functional obsolete. But do you have some very huge slabs of concrete in this ground?
Right.
And what is going to happen to that also, is, will there be use for that, or, how would you work with that? Because eventually we could end up with a lot of blocks of concrete all over the place. And this is something, again, I think that it needs to be given more consideration.
Okay, thank you. Senator Jaramillo?
So I also haven't heard anything about that, or about the size of windmills, or any of the like. So I'm in the same predicament as both of my colleagues.
Okay, thank you. Lynn, next question.
Okay. Do you support the Green Amendment?
All right. Senator Gonzalez, I guess it's your turn to start off.
And I'll be like, my colleague, Representative Chandler, the details is what's on the bill or what will be proposed on the bill. But of course, anytime that we can make progress to that, it's just a much better environment for our state. And depending on, the language of the legislation, I'd say I would be more likely to support it.
Okay. Representative Chandler?
So I'm trying to get my head around what the Green Amendment is. I've heard the term. I have not been briefed on the details. My understanding was it was a constitutional amendment, but I could be wrong on that. As I said, I just heard that term, I think it was yesterday. So I don't know, what's going to be proposed. I think it's going to be proposed on the Senate side, but I can't swear to that. to be determined once I see what it's all about. But like my colleague, Senator Gonzales, I'm always interested in supporting green initiatives. And so I look forward to seeing the language on that bill, or
Okay,
joint resolution, perhaps.
whatever it comes.
Yeah.
All right. Senator Jaramillo.
So I think all of us can agree that we have a right to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment. And so I believe those are the concepts behind this. But I definitely would need to also read the bill. I haven't seen the bill and haven't been briefed on it. But all of us can agree that a clean, healthy environment is something we all deserve. And so I would need to see what's written in that bill and what it outlines before I make any type of decision on that.
Okay, thank you. All right, Lynn,
Do you
we have more
support,
questions?
yeah, do you support a reduction of payday loan interest rates? If so, what rate?
Okay, Representative Chandler, you want to start with that one?
Oh, yay, an easy question for a change. Thank you for that question. Yes, I do support lowering the cap on interest rates. I think they call them installment loans now, but from, I think it's 175 or 176 right now, down to 36%, which is the same percentage that is a cap on what those lending institutions can offer military personnel. So that's what it's tied to. I am almost 100% certain my colleague, Representative Herrera, will be introducing that bill. And I am likely to be signing on as a co-sponsor for that bill.
Okay, thank you. Senator Gonzales?
You know, if I had my choice, I would not even have it at all. You know, that we would be at, those are very high rates. But again, this is where the discussion came in on public banking. And in lieu of, that if we have that in place in the state, that would just be another resource that individuals that, are looking for, like I say, a very small or, a medium-sized loan versus to going to paying such high interest rates. So the lower we can have it, the better. Yes, I would support lowering it.
Thank you. And Senator Jaramillo?
So Representative Chandler and I have discussions all the time with Representative Herrera.
Yeah.
Passionate about this, and who reminds us about the number of New Mexicans who lose their livelihoods on trying to survive day by day because of high rates when it comes to these types of loans. So I'm definitely in support in lowering the rate. And 36% is still even high, right?
Yeah.
Rates throughout the country on different things when it comes to student loans or mortgages. 36% is still high, but a lot lower than 170% that it's currently at. And so Representative Herrera has also asked if I would help co-sponsor this bill. And it's something I would like to help champion in the Senate because of the effects it's having on people in northern New Mexico, losing out because of these high rates.
Thank you. Okay, Lynn, question?
Yes. What will be the effect of COVID-19 hit on the New Mexico budget?
Wow. Senator Gonzales?
Yes, I would, that's a very hard question because we don't know where we're at. And part of that is going to be just depending on how much assistance comes from the federal government. But if that dries up, then we're really going to start seeing the cost, and this is one of the things that that I brought up to our group, and also in Senate Finance, is that that we really have to take a proactive role, before we have the federal funds, and have it budgeted versus, receiving it and what do we do? And so we do have to see these expenses, and we do have to rely right now. The big lift has been from the federal funding that has come to our state. And but I visualize that, the other part is from our medical experts is this could be 6 months, it could be 9 months, it could be another year and a half that we're dealing with this. So the best part to work with this, in my opinion, would be is just have a reserve funding for this, and just being able to use this fund, as needed, by hospitals and our medical field and our testing fields. And now we're seeing, a lot of our responders too. So that would be my part.
Okay, Representative Chandler?
Well, I think definitely our budget has been adversely impacted by COVID, I think that was part of the question. So, I mean, I think that's apparent. But where I think we're fortunate is the various federal CARES Act legislation, or, they have different names. They were a huge help to our state and many other states in terms of weathering the impact. And it allowed the state to offer enhanced unemployment benefits, and also allowed us to offer grants to businesses who were adversely impacted. And I want to underscore that because I know everyone on this call or Zoom call is concerned about our small businesses in the state. And of course, the situation is very difficult for them all. But nonetheless, we have been offering support through initially through low interest loans. And later on, we used CARES Act money. Just in the last legislative session, we allocated $100 million, which I understand has been completely used to support grants for small businesses in the state. So I think it's important for people to know that CARES money and federal funding has been an extraordinarily important support and assistance to the state. And we're hoping with the new administration and new Congress that additional federal funds will be coming to the state to help soften the blow that the pandemic has wreaked on our economy and our working citizens. It's been very difficult, no question about that. I do want to point out that we are not in as dire a strait, I think, as initially forecast in the spring and in the summer. Our reserves are much higher than we were anticipating. They're at 35%, and we have a target of something, I think, like 26 or 27% reserves in the state. So it's not a good situation, obviously, to have so many businesses closed and so many people hurting. But in terms of the budget, the federal funding has been tremendously important to us, and it has helped really soften the impact on our economy and on the state budget. So that's an optimistic and a plus for people to recognize. So with that, I'll end.
Thank you. And Senator Jaramillo?
Recently, I served as a county commissioner and saw the effects that it had even on just our county budget. And so the state budget's definitely going to take a big hit and has taken a hit. When you look at rural communities within the district, a lot of them depend on capital outlay money to help fund projects. And so we do know that capital outlay money isn't going to come in as it did in years past. So a lot of these projects that these small communities, municipalities, and counties rely on isn't going to be there. And so that's going to hit them as well. The state budget did take the hit, but it's thanks to those federal funds that did come in that helped us to at least stay above water for a while. And so I'm hopeful with the new administration in DC that we definitely see those funds continue to funnel to New Mexico to help New Mexicans, to help small businesses, and then in the long run, get us back on our feet so that we can thrive again. And then we're working, as my two colleagues have said, about diversifying New Mexico's economy to find ways that we continue to generate money for the state and to ensure that if there is another pandemic or another emergency in the state, we'd be able to have a reserve that we could tap into.
Thank you. Okay, we are nearing the end of our time limit here, and I'm wondering perhaps if our legislators have any final comments they'd like to make in light of the discussions and the questions that have come in. So Representative Chandler, do you have any closing remarks?
Well, first, of course, thank you again. And it's always a pleasure to be talking with all of you. And we get such great questions. And, you know, I woke up this morning really kind of shaken by what happened yesterday at our federal capitol, as I'm sure every single one of you watching what happened yesterday on the news. It was frightening. And then I thought, I'm going to be talking to the league tonight, you know, and what is more rational in terms of how to approach government than working with a nonpartisan group who is focused on issues. So I thank all of you for bringing us into a sane environment where we can talk about things that are really important to people, working people in the state, you know, people with families, people, kids in school, teachers, all of those things. That's what we are here for, not for the nonsense that's going on in the state capitol and the violence and so on. And it's a pleasure to be participating in a discussion that is focused on what's really important. So thank you for that opportunity. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Senator Gonzales?
I also want to thank you, the sponsors for this forum, and also very impressive for the number of years that you have been sponsoring this. And, what a better way than, starting the session with having a dialogue like this. And, also, just seeing what happened yesterday, I guess you just have to look at it that none of us are exempt from events that, can change something very, very fast. And that precaution, that safety, that safeguard, that's the country that we have become. And it's very interesting that I was able to participate through the U.S. Embassy, and this is in 2000. This is when we're doing with Y2K, and I had the opportunity to work with Mexico, Alaska, and Spain. And at that time, the president for Mexico at that time on the inauguration, when he was talking about the neighbors of the United States, but everything that he mentioned has come true. Mm. Now I see that, and just the different perspective that we have made for the world, of how they view us, and we just really need to pick up again. One of the parts that I really like to see back again in our schools is be able to bring back again history and civics to our schools, in a solid, like the way we had it, and to have everyone to understand and to know what the Constitution is, know what the states are, know what the capitals, and how we have worked up to the point that where we are today. But again, thank you very much, and I have also enjoyed the conversation with you and also with my colleagues.
You're welcome. And Senator Jaramillo?
League of Women Voters and AAUW, thank you so much for this event. I can't wait till the day that we can actually meet in person. I could give you that high five and truly be able to discuss the issues in person, right? I think in getting together, we can truly understand as community what it means, what the needs and wants are for Los Alamos. And so I look forward to the day to not only meeting with you, but with community leaders and those of you residents from Los Alamos and White Rock to truly get a better understanding of what you think you definitely need to make Los Alamos an even better place. And so I always have said this, Los Alamos is my second home as a laboratory employee, and my mother who lives in White Rock. It's always nice to be back, even if it's virtually. So I'm going to encourage all of you to please reach out to me during this session, my very first session, to tell me what needs you have, what your thoughts are on different positions, and to tell me what you believe would help make District 5 a better place for all of us. Thank you again for taking the time this evening to be with us. I look forward to meeting you, as I said, in person, and I'm excited to represent you in the Roundhouse this session. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you. And with that, a special thanks to our legislators tonight for sharing their ideas and insights with us. And thank you for everyone who tuned in, and good night. Have a good one.